One of the big selling points of ontologies is that they are models of the world. If you spend a little time on this channel, you might have heard me talk about the three interpretations that I have for ontologies. They are languages, they are models, and they are graphs, the mathematical structure. And I'm really going to push on that model interpretation today, which is that an ontology describes the world. And in the modern day of large language models, there's a lot of questions about, well, do LLMs have their own world models? And how do we think about ChatGPT's world model? And for all of that stuff, my initial reaction was just like, those things just don't have world models. And I don't really see anybody making the argument that they do. Well, that was true until very recently when I stumbled across a video doing research for another one of the videos that's coming out soon on this channel. And they tried to make the case that LLMs do have world models. So that's the purpose of this video. I'm going to break down that argument. I am going to unpack it and see how valid or plausible it is. And then I'm going to give my own thoughts about some lessons we can take about the nature of models and how seriously we should take the claim that LLMs themselves have models of the world. Hello, welcome to Ontology Explained. I'm Casey Hart, philosopher and ontologist, and I'm excited to have you here with me today. Let's, without further ado, just jump in to that video clip and see him make the argument, and then we'll spend the rest of the time unpacking it and trying to understand it.
Modern LLMs have decent world models because when you try to model language, because language is trying to model the world, when you model something that's modeling the world, the simplest model of that contains a model of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Okay, so this, by the way, I've now paused it with both of their eyes closed, the most flattering way. I'm sure you'd never do that on my YouTube videos. Don't ever pause when I have my eyes closed. Okay, so little bit of background here. This is Liran Shapira, who hosts a YouTube channel called Doom Debates. I'm going to talk about some of his other stuff in the future. It's interesting. You can think of him as more or less an acolyte of Eliezer Yudkowsky. I don't think that's insulting. I think he'd call himself an acolyte of Yudkowsky. And then you have Rocco Miech on the other side, and Rocco is the Rocco of Rocco's Basilisk fame. And I have some other things to say about him, but the video I was working on is on Rocco's Basilisk, so I will talk about him and the other claims later. For now, I just want to evaluate this specific argument that he lays out. So let me just repeat the argument word for word here, which is actually a bit of a tongue twister, but so we can try and get our brains around what's going on. Rocco says, it does turn out that modern LLMs have decent world models because when you try to model language, because language is trying to model the world, when you model something that's modeling the world, the simplest model of that contains a model of the world. I don't know if that was too fast. Should I go one more time? Nah, you can rewind it and listen to it again. I'm actually going to unpack that in an argument and premise conclusion form because I think a better way to lay this out is something like this. Premise 1. LLMs are models of language. They have a model of language. 2, language is a model of the world. So 3, the simplest model of language will be a model of the world. That is more or less what Rocco is saying here. Now, I think that's kind of crazy. I actually think a simpler version of this is also going to be crazy, but we can back off that considerably. Like if we just want to argue that LLMs contain a model of the world, we don't have to say that the simplest model of language is a model of the world, right? So let's do this argument instead. Premise 1, LLMs have models of language. Premise 2, language is model on the world. So 3, LLMs have an implicit model of the world. The model doesn't need to be explicit. It doesn't need to be the simplest possible one. It's just that it's reasonable to talk about LLMs as having models of the world. Okay, we've got a argument here, and when we're doing logic, the first question we should always be asking is it supposed to be an inductive or deductive argument? And it's got a little bit of a deductive flavor to me, but if it's deductive, we want to know if it's valid. That is, do the premises guarantee the truth of the conclusion? If the premises were true, would the conclusion have to be? And it's clearly not valid as written. We're going to need some principle that is going to take us from the fact that LLMs model language and language models the world to this conclusion that the LLM is also modeling the world. And that is a transitivity principle. So here's a first pass at what that transitivity principle would be. If A is a model of B and B is a model of C, then A is a model of C. Right? That's just general transitivity sort of claim. And is that plausible? no, like not not at first blush. To me, when I hear that, someone says, "Does that sound true to you?" I say, "No." But Rocco seems to think it is, and I bet others might be a little bit motivated. So let's try and motivate this. Why would we think that model building has a transitivity to it? And there's something else in this neighborhood which is related, which is causation, and we want to say that causation is transitive, right? So if A causes B and B causes C, then it's reasonable to think that maybe A causes C, right? If my kicking caused the ball to fly and the balls flying caused the window to break, then my kicking caused the window to break. That's not crazy. That's, in fact, not only is that not crazy, that is, I think, the most common sense and reasonable way to think about causation. Now, a whole bunch of things I have to say about causation and transitivity and contrastivity. That's maybe another video series at some point in the future. Drop below in the comments if you'd be interested in that. But for now, let's just say, okay, if causation is on its face a transitive thing, then model building is kind of like that too, right? Because when you build a model of something, the original thing kind of caused the model. And then if that model is the cause of another model, then the original thing is the cause of the second model. So does that give us some viability to this? If A is a model of B and B is a model of C, then A is a model of C? Maybe. Okay, so let's say that that's plausible. That could be the kind of thing that's going on. Uh, but that's just in the causal case, right? Like that means in some way the world causes our language, which causes an LLM. In some way, the world is a cause of the LLM. But that's a different claim than saying that the LLM, that language model itself, is a model of the world. And so let's consider another metaphor here that kept coming to mind when I was thinking about this, and that's the game Telephone or Telephone Pictionary. I'm sure you've all played this at like some icebreaker at a camp or something like that, right? And so Telephone is the game where you all sit in a circle, and then someone who's leading the game thinks of some phrase, right? Like the cow jumped over the moon, and you lean over, the cow jumped over the moon, and you whisper that to your person to your left, and that goes all the way around the circle and comes back around, and you hear what message comes out on the other side. And people say, "Oh, the dish ran away with the spoon." You're like, "Oh no, we ended up at a whole different line," and they get weird and comical. Or you have Telephone Pictionary, which is kind of similar, except instead of whispering things, which sometimes ends up correct when it goes around the circle. But if instead of whispering, you think of a picture, like an image of a cat or something, and then you try and draw that on the person's back in front of you, like with a finger, right? And then that message gets transformed, and you try and the last person in line tries to guess what the original picture is. And hilarity ensues. You're all closer. It was a great icebreaker, stuff like that. That's the kind of structure that I see going on here, right? So when you're playing that game of telephone or telephone Pictionary, each time the message is transmitted, it has that common cause, right? The original message is what caused this message, which is what caused this message, which has caused this message. But then is it reasonable for us to expect that the message at the end or the picture at the end represents the thing at the beginning? Is that the kind of thing that we have going on with LLMs? But of course, there's some disanalogies with this Pictionary telephone game. And that's because, at least in the case of Telephone Pictionary, well, one, we have a big chain of events, but they're all trying to communicate the same message. But what's going on with an LLM is it's trained up on a set of training data. And that training data isn't trying to communicate a thing to the LLM so it will understand what the world's like. That's just the way that humans are using language more or less on the internet, right? It depends on what training data you pick. But we don't have the same sort of intentionality. So maybe it's disanalogous in a good way for LLMs in the sense that it's not a long chain of events, but it's also disanalogous in a bad way. But I'm going to get to that bad way in just a second. What I want to do now is like, okay, let's not spend too much time on the Pictionary or Telephone Pictionary piece of this, but let's think about what models are. So a model is a lossy abstraction away from the thing that's being modeled, right? And it's not an insult to say that a model is lossy. That's the whole point of a model, is that we see something and we can't take the whole thing itself. Maybe it's too complicated or too difficult to move or whatever, right? And so we make a toy version of it that preserves some of the regularities, some of the features that we really care about. So when I make a map, for instance, right, the map preserves spatial ordering of things, and it's got like scaled distances, and so it preserves a lot of the information that I need. When I go up into the hills mushrooming and I use a map, I'm relying on the fact that the topography is going to tell me where the ridges are and like where the skid roads are and things like that. However, the model does not have all of the features in common with the thing that's being modeled. Right? So my map again has some features that the hills don't have. My map is flammable in a way that the rocks and hills are not. My map only weighs a few grams. My map has a legend on it. There's no legend on the world in a real sense here. So the map is a different object. It preserves some regularities from the thing that's being modeled, but not all of them. So now what happens when we take models of models? So if we have a bunch of different maps of an area, and then we make a model of those maps, it's possible that the things that we're latching onto with that second model are features that were present in the original world, but it's also possible that we're latching onto some new properties like the flammability or the having legends. And that means that models of models are at risk of picking up on regularities that have nothing to do with the original thing in question. But there's another problem with thinking about the training data as sort of being a model of reality. So the claim was that language is a model of the world, and so when we model language, well, why do we think that language is a model of the world? Well, we use our language to describe the world. I say things about it, right? Like it's daytime, and I say that 2 + 2 = 4, and I say that hemlocks are greener than maple trees in the fall, a bunch of different things that I can say. And those are supposed to map onto the way that the world is. But of course, when we look at our training data for a machine learning algorithm that's building the weights to our LLM, it's not clear that all of the language there is just trying to describe and say things about the world. Right? Anybody who's spent a little bit of time on the internet knows that a lot of times people are doing a bunch of other things on there. We're writing fiction stories. We are lying to each other. We are grifting. We are telling jokes. And those are ways that we use language. So it's an important way to understand how language works. But that use of language isn't designated to tell us how the world is, how the world functions. Okay, so I've talked about like some related themes here, maybe a little more stream of consciousness, but let's go back to the fundamental arguments and let's consider the premises and the underlying principle and see, does this argument get off the ground? Premise one. Premise one is that LLMs are models of language or have models of language. And I think that's true. I don't even really want to contest that. Whatever those long vector spaces are in Word2Vec or that are underlying the sorts of things that are going on in ChatGPT, those things are models of language. They tell us how to use words and how to predict the next word in some sequence of words. Great. The second premise, though, that language is a model of the world, is plausible, but I've got some real caveats. I don't want to just accept that one full stop because, as we were just saying, lots of times we use language for other things than describing the way that the world is. So language will tell us a lot of things about the world, and that's cool, but that's not the only thing that it does, and it really depends on the training data whether that stuff is representatively telling us specific things about the world. And we'll get back to that in just a minute, too. And then we get to the conclusion, right? But the thing that is getting us from those premises to the conclusion is this other key principle, which I call the transitivity principle. And that transitivity principle, again, is that if A is a model of B and B is a model of C, then A is a model of C. And that principle, I think, is dubious at best. I don't think the prospects are great for that, just as it is stated. But maybe we can make a more specific and correct principle here. So let's take a stab at that. Let's get us a good transitivity principle and then see if we can use that one to make this argument better. If M is a model of P and M prime is a model of M, then M prime is a model of P insofar as the M prime regularities about M were also M regularities about P. Let's say that one more time. If M is a model of P and M prime is a model of M, then M prime is a model of P insofar as the M prime regularities about M were also M regularities about P. And if saying it twice didn't clarify it, no worries. I think it's a mouthful. Here's the idea. Let's suppose, again, we'll use the map example, that we have the real world. We have a set of hills that I'm going to go mushrooming on, and I take a topographical map of it. So that topographical map is a model of the original phenomena out there, the world. And then let's say I use that topographical map, and from it I build a Lego model of the world. So I kind of preserve where the sort of ridges and lines are on my topo map onto how high I build the Legos up on my Lego map. What does that Lego map tell me about the real world? Well, the claim here is that the topo map shared some regularities from the real world, and my Lego map shares some regularities from my topo map. To the extent that the regularities I'm picking out on the topo map, in the Lego map, are also the regularities that the topo map was picking out from the real world, then we have the transitivity we want, that the Legos are telling me about the real world. And I think this is good and plausible. If someone handed me that thing of Legos and said, can you figure out where the ridges are going to be and the valleys are going to be? I'd be like, yeah. They'd be like, well, are you sure it's a model of a model? I'd be like, that's fine, because the things we were picking up on from that first model into the second model are the very things that the first model was telling us about the real world. So we weren't picking up on these like aberrations or just vestiges of the map where like the map had a legend or happened to use blue for the lakes or something like that. We're picking up on the features of elevation, which is specifically what that initial topo map is supposed to be telling us about the real world. So if we apply this back to the LLM case, do LLMs have models of the world? No, I don't think they do. Because I don't trust that the regularities being picked up on by the LLM are the regularities that our language is trying to map on to the real world. Now, of course, that is not a hard and fast rule here, because the better that the training data is, the better that the regularities will be that you can pick out from that will give us a model of the world. So we could make an LLM a better model of the world, or seem as if it had a better model of the world, if we pick a very special set of training data. Namely, if our training data is all and only the true facts about the world, sort of expressed in natural language, then I would really trust the outputs from that LLM. But this brings me to a pet peeve of mine, and this has happened so many times, I can't count it, where someone says, oh, LLMs are so close, or AI is so close. The only issue we have now is we can't just say all the true things and rule out all the false things. And that makes it seem like we've made some sort of progress, but that's the whole deal, right? Like, if I could tell you right now, oh, here's a set of all of the true sentences about the world, and if it's false, it's not on the set. So now you know all of the true things. That would be pretty sweet. But that's not what we have, right? It's ridiculously hard to know all of the true things about any domain in the world, much less all of them. And so if we're treating the fact that we have lots of language to be a proxy for we know all we need to know about the world, you're just crazy, because that only works if that language is telling us all and only the true things about the world. And bad news for folks, this might be a spoiler, the internet does not contain all and only true things about the world. So we're at a loss here. We've got a lot more work to do. Do LLMs have models of the world? No. But they are proxies for facts about the world, insofar as the language that they are modeling is telling us things about the world. And that means that the true claims that come from LLMs are not just mere accidents, but they're kind of a happy byproduct rather than a deliberate, logical conclusion of some sort of like well thought out mapping of things in the world. But you know what does have models of the world? You know what is a model of the world? Ontologies. Seem like a pretty good idea. You might want to, like and subscribe to some YouTube channel that will tell you more about them. See you in the next video.